Here now by the founder of the Mindlink Foundation, Rod Briggs. Rod is an international lecturer and consultant whose area of expertise lies in the mind sciences. He'll be speaking at the South Court Hotel this evening at 7:30 about the mind and how to use both sides of your brain. Good morning, Rod. How are you? Good to see you.
Morning, John.
How can you tell if someone is using both sides of his or her brain?
Well, very simply, they can tell. Einstein called it the neurobiology of excellence. There are times in everyone's lives where he called it the flow state. For instance, gardeners get it when they're gardening. I'm not a gardener, but gardeners tell me, oh, I feel so great when I'm in the garden. Time seems to disappear. I got more energy at the end of it than when I started it. That kind of experience. Most of us are aware of it, but most of us are mainly aware of it because we're aware when we don't have it, when we're having the wheels off day. And really, various experts tell us that we've got this supercomputer in our brain. Time magazine, for instance, has a great quote. It says that the human brain is the most complicated feat of engineering in the known universe. Well, that should make you feel like God. But for most people, it doesn't. And it's not because they are not good at using their brain. It's just that they've never been taught to use their brain properly.
What does each side of the brain do? What is each side for?
Well, we have a logical brain and a creative brain, if you like. The left hemisphere is predominantly do with logical function, and the right hemisphere is predominantly the creative side. But if you think of school, we're supposed to get an education at school. Education comes from the Latin word educare, to bring forth. But how many of us got brought forth as kids? Normally it was crammed in, reading, writing, arithmetic, and the victor's versions of history. So now all of that is logical function. In fact, if you had a little creative moment and had a little daydream, you got moaned at. Stop daydreaming, boy. So because of that, most of us are, if you like, logical giants and creative dwarves. And it's when we use both sides together that we start to really tap into this neurobiology of excellence.
How does one achieve that?
The short answer is learn to relax. Whenever you are in a relaxed state, almost on the edge of sleep, both sides of your brain automatically start talking together. Have you ever noticed that your best ideas are at 3 o'clock in the morning?
Yes.
You wake up in the middle of the night and you think, my God, why hasn't anybody thought about it? And of course, at 9 o'clock, when you've got to get up and put it into practice, you can't even remember what it was. So there are times when it is natural that we get into these states. Interestingly enough, that state is also the state when your conscious and subconscious talk to each other, when our intuitive side is working best. And if you look at where genius lives not in high IQ. Genius lives in being able to express this intuitive side and use it in creative ways. And the sad thing is that when we need it most is when we're the most stressed. And when we're the most stressed, that's when we find it the most difficult to relax.
But because of the way our society is structured, as you've pointed out, is it ever possible to get to the state of relaxation required when you need it?
Very simply. We all knew it when we were fine. But then life gets overcomplicated as we get older. There are some very simple tricks, and if we have time, I'll share one with you for the listeners, that can stop your day getting away with you. Here's a classic example. Most people are aware of this. You get up in the morning and you're in a good mood and life is wonderful, and then on the way to work you get stuck in traffic. Gridlock coming down your dock road or wherever. And because of that, you are late at work. Because you're late at work, I don't know if you've ever seen anybody arriving late at work. They'll run across the car park. Like 10 seconds is going to make a difference. But we arrive flustered, so we haven't just had a bad time in the traffic, we're bringing it with us. We run into the office, we shout at our secretary, she gets flustered, and all of a sudden the day gets away with us. Well, At the end of that day, you'd come home, shout at the kids, and moan that you've had a lousy day. When in actual fact, the only thing that was lousy was the morning traffic, and you managed to stretch it out throughout the day. So here's a little tip. Next time you arrive late at work, instead of rushing in, as you switch the car off, pause, take a breath, and as you release the breath, all you've got to tell yourself is that that moment, i.e. the time in the traffic, is finished. The next moment, you going into work, hasn't happened yet. And in that little pause, you'll find a little moment of peace. You'll still be late, but you'll be able to walk into work, not shout at the secretary, and so your day won't get away from you. Little things like that.
Would I be correct to imagine that it will take a few of those episodes before the brain really gets that you've done that moment as you talk?
Yes, well, that's partly what we're going to do this evening, is teaching people how to do that. But it goes a whole herd further than that. Because when you start to be able to operate in this neurobiology of excellence, your problem solving is infinitely better. And because of that, the payoff is so good that once you've felt it once, you think, oh, I'd like to do that again. And so it actually is a very simple thing to learn.
It's fascinating stuff, Rod. So we're going to stay with you. We'll take the break and talk a bit more. Having a very enjoyable chat with the founder of the Mindlink Foundation, Rod Briggs. And Rod, a question has come in on 461-995 from Amanda, and she says that she always understood that the left side of the brain was the part that we didn't use much, but that is the creative side. If you're some kind of genius, you're more creative. What do you think of psychics and mediums? Are they tapping into the part of the brain the majority of us don't use?
Well, earlier on I said that it's a lot more to it than just making you more efficient. We all have, if you like, an intuitive side. We tend to call it women's intuition, but it's not a female thing. Businessmen call it gut feel because it sounds better, but it's all the same stuff. And the interesting thing is that all mediums and psychics are doing is tuning in to the voice, if you like, and where your attention goes, your energy flows, so they start to become more aware of it. But I don't care how skeptical someone is. Everybody I've ever met has had, they try and phone a friend, but they can't get through because their friend's trying to phone them, or something in a dream becomes relevant, or worst of all, the déjà vu moment. You know, there are clues there that there's more going on than we perceive. But instead of just stopping the bus and saying, this déjà vu moment is telling me something important about my psyche, we just mark it down as an interesting fact. So it happens to everybody. Just some people have developed it.
Now, a woman who attended one of your seminars went on to win the jackpot in Deal or No Deal.
Yes.
And was there a specific connection?
Well, there was a great connection. In fact, that woman will be doing one of the lectures with me at the weekend at the same venue, and explaining to people how Mindlink. From the outside, if anybody's seen Deal or No Deal, it sounds like it's, and it feels like it's a game of luck. But it's not, and I'll explain. Sue's game, you're talking about Suzanne Mulholland, who won the $250,000. And Sue's game was game number 560-something. And she was only the third person to have won it. And yet, if it was just an act of chance or random luck, then somebody should win that every 22 games because there's 22 boxes. So in other words, people are falling away much greater than chance would say. And that's simply because their psychology gets away from them. It becomes hugely tense as soon as the banker starts offering them large money. They start to get out of balance in their brain and they start to make silly decisions. So what Suzanne did was pre-plan all of this, plan all her decisions, and it flowed absolutely swimmingly. So yes, there is a connection.
Why did you come to Ireland?
Well, I've been teaching people whole brain learning for a long time in South Africa, which is where I live. And a few years ago, one of your Dublin GPs, a Dublin doctor, was visiting South Africa. And he was extremely stressed and was sent on one of my courses. And on the weekend, he cured himself of a 22-year sleeping pill addiction. He came back to Dublin and sat on it for 3 months to make sure it wasn't a quick fix. And then he phoned me and said, "You've got to come out here and start talking to people in Ireland." And I've been coming here ever since, a couple of times a year.
How did you get involved in the mind sciences?
I had to. I was born with one lung working. For the first 13 years, I was crippled. I could walk, but I couldn't run. And motivated by fear, because the thought of somebody slitting my chest open while I'm not there does nothing for me, I found some information that I thought, if this is correct, maybe I can fix my own lung. And the short version of that is I did. So I never had the op. My lung is now fine. That was very many years ago.
Through using your mind?
Through using your mind. You see, it's called psychoneuroimmunology. We can bring our attention to any part of our body. We can bring our attention to any part of our body and increase blood supply, increase oxygen. The classic example everybody knows is an erection. A thought creates an oxygen and blood supply change, and you have a physiological change. But what people are not so aware of is that you can do that to anybody with practice and training.
What kind of people do you end up working with then?
I work with and have worked with Olympians from Ireland and from all over the world. We've made a few world champions in different sports. I lecture at universities. I did a lot of work with the HSC in social work and people who are operating on high stress. Sportsmen from all over the place. Businessmen. One of your businessmen of the year a couple of years ago, a man called Porrig Okaja from Aaron.
Oh, yes, indeed, yeah. It was at a lecture he gave only a couple of weeks ago, a very interesting one, yeah.
Porrig and his people all have been through my process. I've lectured at the MBA courses at Smurfit, and I also lectured to the public, which is what this weekend's all about.
Finally, if we, or even a percentage Irish population, were to use our minds as fully as you suggest, could we even manage to navigate our way out of the crisis in the euro and the economic problems?
Absolutely. And that's why this time is more important than any other time to learn these tools. As I said, the more stressed we are, the less of both sides of our brains we use, and the worse our thinking process. If anybody's ever had to introduce somebody who they think they know walking across them at a do, the more important the do, the more difficult the recall is. And that's entirely because of the stress levels. As soon as the stress drops, of course, when the person leaves the room, you know the name. So that's a good example that when you are in these high stress situations, that's when you need your creative input. That's when you need those ideas at 3 o'clock in the morning. And absolutely it would make a difference.
I can't tell you how many times to me.
It happens to everybody.
And it's the most important too, as you say. Well, listen, thank you very much. Really fascinating conversation with you. Rod Briggs of the Mindlink Foundation, and he's speaking at the South Court Hotel in Raheen this evening at 7:30. And that is the size of it for this morning from us. The winner of today's tickets